Great. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Hrant Dink Foundation for bringing us together. We're delighted to be here. We're delighted to be sharing this opportunity to talk about these issues, but obviously it's equally as important to reach out to other segments of the civil society, and as best as I can, I will do my best to speak slowly in order to assist our interpreters, and I'd like to thank them in advance. Now, welcome everyone. And we are here to talk about coexistence, and we are here to talk about the role of culture and arts. How can we make use of culture and arts for coexistence? Culture and arts are two concepts that we're used to hearing right next to each other, and they perhaps embody different things for different people. And there are culture professionals here. Esra, Feray, and Rumeysa are all with us. We'd like to thank them very much. And culture professionals, I said, but obviously we all have our different areas of expertise, and we're going to be talking about them in a minute. Now, here's how we should start. If everyone is ready, let's wait for everyone to be seated. Now, actually, in the last couple of years, we have been going through difficult times, challenging times, and when it comes to refugees and asylum seekers and immigrants, there's hate speech that is on the rise, and we all experience that and see that. When we live in a city like Istanbul, where there are millions of people, it seems as if we have been losing our sense of identity increasingly. I mean, from my closest friends to my family to my colleagues, I have been talking about this whole concept of being the other, and I am the director of a cultural studies department at the Istanbul Culture and Arts Foundation, and we make policies on culture and arts, we make publications, we organize meetings as a team, and this idea of living together, coexistence, cultural plurality, cultural expression, diversity in cultural expression. Of course, these are at the basis of cultural policies. These are the building blocks, if you like. And all of these things fall within the realm of cultural policies. But in order for us to make policies in this area, civil society organizations and culture professionals need to defend these values and raise their voices to defend coexistence. That's what we need to do. And we also need to explain why we defend coexistence. That is a message that we need to convey, and especially at this difficult time that we're going through. Yes, culture and arts have an important role when it comes to coexistence and intercultural dialogue. I think the culture and arts have an important role to play in different countries. How does this happen? Cultural rights or inclusiveness, what sorts of practices are there? What sorts of good practices can we learn from is what we are hoping to discuss here at this session. What sorts of methods can be utilized, and through culture and arts, how can we foster new get-togethers, and how can we make this possible? Basically, this is what we're going to be tackling during this session. And as we begin, let me also remind you one more thing. As I said at the beginning, when it comes to culture and arts and plurality in cultural expression, cultural plurality, these are important concepts for us, for the Istanbul Culture and Arts Foundation as well. In 2017, we actually published a report on coexistence, a research and a report that was really important for us. And Kim Ragel and Feyzi Baban are also with us. We'd like to say hello to them and say welcome to them as well. And on our website, this report is available. And actually, in 2015, we started first receiving immigrants from Syria, and then we decided to focus on culture and arts, to use them as a tool to facilitate coexistence and forge better ties between different communities of people. And this was a 5-year research, and we focused on culture and arts specifically. And around the same time, in 2017, the Istanbul Biennial had the theme, a good neighbor. Who is a good neighbor? That was the theme of the biennial at the time. How to be a good neighbor? That was the question. And through that question, we tackled ways of living together. If I'm not mistaken, 500,000 people visited the biennial, and we had the opportunity to discuss these issues together. So this is a good example. As well, I mean, through a biennial, through contemporary art, you can get millions of people talking, and but obviously, we would very much like to hear from you as well as to what other good examples there are. Now, here's my question to each and every one of you to kick off this discussion. I think we can go in this order. Yes, this is important. Coexistence, living together is important. But why is it especially important in the recent period that we're going through? Now, okay, let me begin. Hello, this is Rumeysa, and I have a platform where I publish news about art and events, and at the heart of what I do actually is the question that you asked. Recently, promoting coexistence has gained importance because our ways of seeing are changing. We need to change our ways of seeing. We live locked up in certain norms. Let's say if you're in Germany, you're expected to be white and Christian. In Turkey, you're expected to be a Muslim and a Sunnite. And other identities are sort of sidelined. And, we live sadly in such a society. And people are otherized if they do not fall within the stereotypes. So we need to change our ways of seeing, and for that to happen, we need to transformative power of culture and arts. But obviously, we need to translate this into action. Yes, I am someone who has dedicated their entire life to this field, but all of us here, I think we believe in the transformative power of arts. I think we have all experienced this in our lives. Those who you think as the other may give you the opportunity to identify yourself with that person through art and culture. We all may have prejudices and misconceptions about certain people, but these misconceptions can well be shaken through certain experiences and through art. So if we're going to encourage coexistence, culture and arts is the way to do it, I think. It is such an important propeller, especially when it comes to immigrants and refugees, different ethnicities, different genders, different sexual orientations, and so on and so forth. These people need to be included in the process of culture generation, and when that is the case, what happens is there's a visual get together. You see a different skin color, a different way of dressing, and then beyond that, you are exposed to a different consciousness. You get to understand what those people think and feel, and as we are exposed to that, we transform ourselves. We end up transforming ourselves. A Syrian refugee, an Afghan refugee, what they're thinking today in Istanbul, let's say, if we do not meet that person, right, what we read in the media will be quite negative, and to the extent that people from different being a refugee is a legal status actually, but that is also diminished, and that is also misconstrued to create some negative perceptions in our heads. That's what the media does. But culture and arts, and also culinary arts, when you try a different cuisine, you sort of warm up to that culture. But culture and arts does that in an intellectual on an intellectual level. That clash or that confrontation is really good for us. Why is it important, especially now, is my question to you. Well, my Turkish is fine, but I should like to speak in English.
I'm working in a cultural and environmental foundation, Allianz Foundation, based in Berlin, but we are operating in whole Europe and in the Mediterranean region. Let me know if I'm talking too fast for the translation. So I'm stating the obvious. Maybe first I'm speaking of from the perspective of an organization and as a person based in Northern Europe, and therefore would like to also point out the challenges from this perspective, like the rise of nationalism, authoritarian governments, rise of populism, police violence, LGBTQI free zones in Poland. So we are also right now confronted more and more in Europe with all these issues of endangered life. And what I want to point out also is in this context, of course, that the issues of or aspect of coexistence is one of, it's also an environmental question for us. So we as foundation try to see this coexistence also as a point of coexistence between human beings, but also with animals, plants, and the whole nature, as we see that all these challenges we are confronted right now are interconnected with each other. So the rise of populism is connected with the rise of the sea levels and all these issues. So this is something we are working on right now, and this is these challenges are, of course, the reasons why we are trying to foster coexistence with all living beings and organisms.
Harika, çok teşekkürler. Esra.
Thank you very much, Ezra. Hello. Yes, this is a difficult question, but here's how I should start, I think. Now, today, as you see, you know, we are here for an inclusive, accessible festival. We have interpreters joining us, and on social media as well. There are those who are following us, our participants who are online, and let me provide a verbal explanation of where we are. We are in Lütfi Kırdar Congress Center. We are in a hall, and we are 4 speakers, and we have floral dresses on, and we are in our 40s. We are young women, and we have our audience, and we're delighted to be with our audience here today, talking about coexistence. So now, in last 8 years, I have been working with the British Council. British Council tries to forge cultural ties between Turkey and the UK since 1940. Actually, in 100 countries around the world, British Council has been operating since 1940, and I'm with that organization, and I have actually participated in many different cultural projects, and I have actually worked in many different areas of civil society, and in culture and arts as well. I have been fortunate enough to work as a cultural professional, and I think, well, as Özlem said at the beginning, when it comes to my family, my environment, who is a culture professional? Why am I working as part of arts foundations? And why do I not work in another industry? Sometimes people ask me this question, sometimes my family, and sometimes I try to explain to artists why this is needed as well, because, and I think this is something that we experience a lot in Turkey, people always see the other as the other. We're used to being otherized and othering other people, and especially in the last couple of years, this has been exacerbated. But equally, our awareness has been rising, despite the challenging political climate. We're trying to sort of achieve sustainability in culture and arts, despite all the difficulties. So togetherness is important. Being cognizant of different cultures and being cognizant of different sensitivities is important, I think. Thank you. One more question. Culture and arts projects, you know, do you think these projects can give us a new perspective when it comes to the concept of the stranger, or can we create new spaces and new communities? What would you say? You have 2 minutes each. Well, yes, of course we can create new spaces, new communities, and try and combat this concept of the stranger, quote unquote. And as Esra indicated, these differences have been sort of compounded, is being compounded through the media, and there are so many people who are not represented enough. And when you include these people, and when you realize that they're actually individuals, not just carriers of a certain label, but we all know that we're all humans, but in order to really conceive that, I think you need to meet these people. When it comes to refugees and immigrants, I mean, a Syrian that person is no longer, or that artist is no longer a Syrian refugee. For you, they become someone who is interested in climate crisis, for instance, and an artist focusing on that. And our identities are quite have a lot of permeability, I think. And just a story that I'd like to share with you. Nadir Sönmez is a great actor that I love, and he is a gay man in Turkey, and he has a wonderful play who focuses on what it means to be a gay man in Turkey, and it has so many layers. It's a brilliant play, and I once wrote an article about this play, and Nadir one day he receives an email from a follower of mine who wears the hijab, and the hijabi woman says that she, for the first time in her life, sympathized with a homosexual man. So this may sound like stereotypical, a hijabi woman on the one side and a homosexual man on the other, but this is a true story, and I think it is quite powerful. I think it's really important. I think we need to create these spaces and create those get-togethers. But an important handicap is symbolic tokenism, what we call symbolic tokenism. We shouldn't do things just for the sake of doing that, or cover any subject just for the sake of covering a subject, right? And sometimes, you have a token black, a token Asian, token gay in a play, or in a TV series, but that's not really useful. I think what we need to do is we need to pave the way for actual human encounters. That's what I think. So this is my 2 cents. Thank you. And Feray, how about you? What would you like to say? How can we create new spaces, new communities in arts and culture?
That culture has the power to change narratives, to claim utopias, and all this flowery, beautiful thoughts. I also share them, and also to interrupt narratives and to give the space to the so-called others. And I would like to easily give an example from Berlin for this. So there is a population of, I think, 40% of people with the so-called migration background in Berlin, 30% in German in general. There are cities with 70% with somehow migration biographies, so my grandparents from Turkey, for example. And still, of course, or unfortunately, these people are not represented also in arts and culture. And there was a theater in Kreuzberg, the so-called Ballhaus Nauninstraße, and they said, okay, no, we will give the stage to the others, the so-called others. We will interrupt this narrative, and they performed each night this new possibilities of living together, of coexistence in the theater. Then this theater, or the director of this theater changed to one of the biggest state theaters in Berlin, the Maxim Gorki Theater, and she's the director now, and they are continuing performing this coexistence as a post-migrant theater, and they don't claim integration but disintegration with this also, so coexistence as a concept of disintegration. And this would be an example I would like to set in this context of giving utopia space and making the space a reality and becoming the most famous and successful theater in Germany.
Harika. Yeni bir kültür yönetimi ve
So it's a new culture management and policy model. Esra? Well, I want to continue from the utopia. We need protected areas where we can experience utopia, and culture and arts provides that space. In fact, for very long years, all the NGOs and art movements could stand together by protecting these areas. I remember some examples. 5 Films for Freedom by British Council was a global project. LGBT right defenders were made visible through this short films festival that was opened at the global level. And for the first time this year at Musée Gazhane, we had Women of the World Festival that was London-based. So we had the Istanbul version. So this inclusiveness and coexistence identities, Rumeysa also touched upon that. So when we talk about coexistence, in fact, we live in different congregations in our own circles, and you become aware of that. Muslim women cannot be feminists. There are people who think like that. And they attend the Havle workshops, and they can completely change their minds. Or refugees fled their country because they were afraid. They took shelter in another country, and they are a burden. There are people who think like that, and then they attend the refugee women's kitchen. Just based on a recipe or through a short film, they can build empathy. So you can put yourself in the shoes of the other, and you can feel the empathy. I think culture and arts has been seen as very niche, very elite, and very different in this country for very long years. It has been othered all this time. I believe the only way to spread it is this notion of people feeling they can breathe together in these protected areas. They should show that solidarity in this pressure environment, because every evil breeds goodness, every evil breeds good, and maybe this pushes us to create these areas to build that empathy. Well, you all talked about great examples, and we can talk at length about each and every one of them, but we have limited time, so maybe we can go deeper in other discussions. Rumeysa, let's talk about the public space. Especially in recent years, our public spaces are getting narrower and narrower. So when it comes to the so-called disadvantaged groups, what does culture and art mean for these groups in the public space? There are those who cannot express themselves in the public space. So what does culture and art mean for them? Well, of course, this is an area where different groups cannot be represented to a great extent. They're probably feeling disappointed about that. In fact, different groups, maybe we should just think specifically for each different groups. It's necessary to listen to them with sincerity. And it's necessary to hear from them what the barriers are in front of this coexistence. So we can perhaps help them participate in the processes. For instance, we don't discuss this a lot in terms of immigrants in Turkey. Yes, this is in our programs as a topic, but how much can an immigrant be part of the creation of culture? I thought about this before coming to this panel. How many Syrian refugee artists do I know? How many exhibitions of them have I seen? It's very little, but how much does this environment support that? How much of this is part of our agenda? We need to question this. If it's a drama, a Syrian artist or an actor or actress being on stage, that's not about it. In all the roles throughout the production process, they should be there. You know, the director, the dramaturgist, the communication person. At different levels, it's necessary to involve these people so that you can truly feel these people are being represented. I mean, yes, we talk about empathy, we talk about transformation, we say arts will be the catalyst of coexistence. Yes, but we are part of the society as culture people. First, we need to transform. I do culture communication, I announce several events, but when it comes to different identity groups, I should just be in touch with those different groups. I should first transform myself so that I can contribute to the transformation of something else. So Feray and Esra will probably explain better based on the British and German examples. I have just a few notes. There is a recent book written by Özlem Can Yürek. It's about this brain drain from Turkey. So she is one of the academics who's settled in Berlin now. So she is examining performance arts and culture policies. She had a very comprehensive research about that. In the Turkey, I think it's a great book that the art circles in Turkey can be inspired by. For instance, in Germany, there are funds given. Perhaps you will explain it better. 360-degree New City Culture Fund. There is this fund, and it's not just about programming, but from the repertoire to the technical team. On the production and audience side, they're trying to provide diversity in order to get this fund. In fact, it has created a new employment area. There are diversity actors. This is now a profession. And that's why these people are working for. Of course, there is need for qualitative and quantitative research. You do this every year. There is an annual report, but it needs to be more. We need more of such studies. And beyond financial difficulties, it's important to remove the barriers in front of these groups to participate in these cultural events. Is it a language barrier? Is it a problem about the communication of information? We need to understand that in Germany there is a lot of academic research, and it's very detailed. You just hire an actor to provide diversity, but do you truly change that atmosphere, or is it just because of positive discrimination? I mean, so these are some details that are luxurious for us at this point, and I hope that we can reach that level with this kind of discussion. And another example is the British Film Institute. They have very detailed criteria, 9 criteria actually. It's very detailed. A pregnant woman being represented, for instance. There are so many things that you need to provide. And when you see a film that receive their support, you understand that. And on the NGO side, there is an immense accumulation of knowledge there. So perhaps there is need for some sort of matchmaking. So there is this wealth of knowledge that is accumulating. It should be transferred to the actors in the art world, and actually this is being done. We are doing this. Perhaps we need to do it more. That would be great. I believe I have some more time. I'll just share a little story and finish. So I really care about this true understanding issue, and actually my life is about that. I grew up in a conservative environment. I graduated from religious school, and I met the other through art to begin with. It was very transformative. As of my teenage years, there were other people who became secular like me afterwards. So actually you first meet those cultural products to experience the empathy, and your mind starts to transform that way. Let me give an example, a recent example. I think it's very interesting. A while ago, there was this dorm of a sect, and a boy committed suicide in that religious dorm. And the secular people around me, and I thought, what can we do about it? We had this concern. This was discussed a lot. We thought a lot about that. And of course, I am in culture, so I talked to an author called Selçuk Orhan. He has this story and novel. I recommended these 2 books of him. So if you want to have this conversation, you should first understand what's going on in the background. You should just see the repertoire, the different characters, and these books are written very elaborately, and I got a lot of messages, and we discussed those novels a lot. And I thought one comment was very interesting. It was a colleague in the arts sector, my age, and she said that during her teenage years in Istanbul, her own joined a Buddhist cult, and she had some pressure because of that. That was incredible for me. In Istanbul, there is a Buddhist cult, and there is somebody growing in this cult, and there is this totally different life. And so we actually communicate this experience to one another, and we have this flow of emotions. So I truly believe in that. This is something that really excites me. It is not negative. I see it as something positive. I mean, what we're going through is really bitter, but I think it's going to end up in a positive way, and I think culture plays a major role here. I totally believe in that. Thank you very much. So diversity is a source of power that we need to embrace. Those are important examples. Feray, Allianz Kulturstiftung, that's where you work. You support several projects, and in Germany, you have an idea about what's being done in this area in Germany. Can you talk about this concept of cultural citizenship? What do you think? What do you associate it with? And how about the cultural pluralism in Germany? Are there some inspiring examples?
Okay, I'll set it up for you.
Harika.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, after what you said, I think, yes, the discourse in Germany is a different one right now. So there's even diversity management in companies. Even capitalism has explored that there's a chance in diversity or the power in diversity. So we are in a different, working and living in a different situation where we more and more also try to change the audiences in, for example, so not only bringing people, diverse people on the stage, but also changing the audiences and so on. So this is something I wanted to point out again, and I already told one example, the example of the Maxim Gorki Theater as a best practice for changing discourse, because now this idea of post-migrant societies is also in science, and it's spread it out in politics, so it's not only staying in the cultural area. For now, this hybridity is not only in something which is represented in theater now, so this is really utopian, but I also want to tell one, or speaking about cultural citizenship, I think, or for us, it's a question of participation and democratization of the cultural scene also, and I would like to speak about it also with an example instead of theorizing it. During the so-called refugee crisis also in Germany, a Belarusian artist, Marina Naprushkina, she went to the refugee shelters and started to do artwork there. And then she realized, oh my God, everybody wants to do it, is coming to my ateliers, and she started an initiative, Neue Nachbarschaft Moabit. Means New Neighborhood Moabit. It's like an initiative with refugees or from refugees and not for them, of course. And they, having said this, changing discourse and doing cultural politics through arts and culture, the biggest difference or importance of these institutions is not only that it's like not for the people, but they also started a really critical discourse on hierarchies between cultural workers and hierarchies in solidarity. And I would like to read a sentence from a Syrian author about this. Yassin Al-Haj Saleh is his name. He came through Turkey to Germany after being 16 years in jail in Syria, and he's writing about the work on solidarity in Germany, or this coexistence things. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to imagine Syrians or Palestinians or Kurds expressing solidarity with the victims of a political or natural catastrophe in Western countries. Yet, the direction of solidarity seems always to be contrary. It is those powerful Western nations who express always solidarity. And yeah, so as it seems that, of course, like when I tell examples like diverse theaters against marginalization and so on, still there's this power relation also going on in countries like Germany. And for me it was important in this panel also not come from a German Northern European country and telling that there is going on, or there are so many utopian projects, but there are also still this huge hegemonial hierarchies going on, and people are discussing it a lot. And I think this is also cultural citizenship, discussing about this kind of participation and hierarchy and working together. Yeah.
Çok teşekkürler. Evet.
Thank you very much. In the beginning, I talked about this cultural pluralism being developed through arts. I talked about this report, and the doctor there talks about radical cosmopolitanism. So we are all part of humanity. We should accept that, and we should transform together. So I think this cultural citizenship example is about that. That's my association. Esra, about disadvantaged groups, there are different needs that we're talking about, and it looks like this is not among fundamental needs. Or when you deal with fundamental needs, the state or most of NGO does not really include arts and culture in this picture. But I believe that through the pandemic, we realized culture and arts is a need, just like bread and water. So in British culture, you have arts and culture projects. And how do you approach participation in social life through culture and arts? You're the art director of British Council, and you're a cultural professional working in this area for very long years. So what do you think? Well, in fact, I believe British Council, the biggest teaching of British Council for me is this concept of inclusiveness. I learned the details and essence. I understood the essence and detail of this concept, and I actually grew by realizing events that will help me understand what it means. We talked about accessibility. In fact, in arts and culture, we should first look at ourselves, look in the mirror. We just think of the audience as the last component in Turkey. Of course, there are several reasons. There is the sustainability crisis, there is production crisis, artist rights crisis, professionalism crisis. So in this crisis environment, who are we going to share with? What are we going to share? Who is the other person? So who is in front of us? This is not an area that we can actually step into. It's just our last concern. So this disadvantaged group issue, in fact, I worked with the team of Everything is Accessible team as a student, and we talked about this concept of hindered individual. In fact, where is the disadvantage? It's not in the individual itself. It's about that, it's a shortcoming of not including this person. It is the society's problem in a way. There is a barrier in front of that. For instance, there is a space for audience with wheelchairs here. That's very valuable. I wish they were here. Or sign language translation. I remember when we first started using it, it was 2014 or 2015. I was thinking, how are we going to access? Because we didn't have network. We could explore the NGOs, but how can we bring the audience in? How is this going to be possible? So it's important to invest in this area. When you are devising a project, you should think about the sign language translation. The UK has an advantage. You cannot conduct any activity without Turkish-English translation in Turkey, but also there is this principle of accessibility and inclusiveness. So we have sign language translation in all our events. In fact, in British Council Turkey, we collaborate with other cultural institutions during these events. So when we sign a contract with these institutions, this is part of the contract. This translation should be enabled. It should be inclusive. There should be wheelchair access for the audience. So we just put these in the contract. Is there an elevator? Is there a ramp? So we think about all of these issues. So these are things that we've always pushed to the background. And socioeconomic differences, this is another discussion. We live in a city that is as big as a country, and there can be, this art audience that can come from the so-called periphery. So in Istanbul, Müze Gazhane, we collaborated with the Metropolitan Municipality to realize that recently, but unfortunately there was a lot of snow during that festival. So this March event was like a January day. So we work on the principles of inclusiveness, but unfortunately the audience with wheelchair couldn't come, but 11% of the audience used sign language translation. So this work was also possible through the efforts of our translators.
Her zaman şehirdeki bireyleri toplantılar yaparak onların bu festivallerdeki beklentisini anlayabilmek için çalışarak gerçekleşiyor ve biz Büyükşehir Belediyesi ile olan işbirliğimizin avantajını kullanarak farklı mahallelerden kadınları iki büyük ön toplantı yaptık ve benim için muazzamdı. Birbirinden çok farklı yaş, sosyoekonomik, eğitim seviyesindeki kadınlarla bir odada birlikte olmak ne demek sorusunu tartışmaya açtığımızda bütün yaşam gerçeklerimizin dışında çok benzer kaygılar, sorunlar ya da umutlar taşıdığımızla karşılaştık ve ben o katılımcılarımızı festivalde ağırlayabilmek istedim ve bunun için de bir ulaşım gerekiyordu mahallelerden. Bunu da belediyenin tabii desteğiyle gerçekleştirecektik. Fakat kar olduğu için belediye bu desteği bize sağlamadı ve biz kadınları festivalde ağırlayamadık. İçimde büyük bir ukde olarak kalmıştır. Birçok sanat kurumu, belki müzeler ve İKSV bu konuda öncülük yaptı. Öğrenciler için ücretsiz bilet uygulamaları. Bunlar çok değerli. Ulaşım, bütün bu kapsayıcılığı, yani bu farkındalıkta olmak gerek. Hepimiz, hani gene pandemi öğretilerine geri dönersek, hepimiz aynı gemide değiliz ya da teknede miydi? Onu hatırlayamadım ama hani bu farklı gerçekliklerle ama gene herkesin ütopyayı yaşama hakkı olmalı. Biz sanat neden toplumumuzda ilk sırada değil sorusuyla mücadele edeceksek bu yüzleşmeyi yaşayıp biz seyircimizi ne kadar birlikte var olabildiğimizi ispatladık. Seyirciye kendimizi nasıl ispatladık sorusuna geri dönmemiz gerekiyor sanırım.
Çok teşekkürler Esra. Ben de danışma kurulunda olmaktan büyük bir mutluluk duyduğum bu Wow Dünya Kadınlar Festivali İstanbul hikayesini çok zenginleştirici ve öğretici olarak buluyorum. Toplumsal cinsiyet eşitliği konusundan bahsederken karşımıza çıkan bu kesişimsellik, biraz zor telaffuz edilen ve anlaşılması zor olan ama bütün bu farklı kimlikleri bir arada ve farklı meseleleri bir arada tartışmamıza imkan veren kesişimsellik kavramını da hatırlatmakta fayda var. Kültür politikaları açısından bize çok önemli perspektif sunuyor. Dünya Kadınlar Festivali'ni yaparken bütün bu konuları bir arada tartışır olduk aslında. Bu vesileyle de
when we were organizing the Women of the World Festival, this was really important. So we have actually come to the end of the time allocated to us. So let's hear from our participants. And if you have any questions, please feel free to share your questions with us. And also, do you have any additional comments? One last time, let me give the floor to my panelists. Feray, Rumeysa, do you have anything to add based on, after everything that we have discussed, anything that you'd like to share with us? And also, let me also take a look at our participants. let's get your final words first, and then we will move on to the questions. Please go ahead. Oh, and also please introduce yourselves. Microphone, please.
Çeviri için.
Kime soracağınızı da ifade ederseniz.
Also, could you please tell us who this question is for? Let me ask my question, and then you can decide who should answer the question. There are different disadvantaged groups, different minority groups in the society, and in cinema or in theater, for instance. These people are being accentuated, and this is great, but sometimes what happens is this becomes off-putting because continuously you are subject to the same stereotypes and same tropes, and isn't it exhausting for the spectators? I mean, Lord of the Rings, a new TV series will be launched soon, and disadvantaged groups or black about racism against black people, black actors will be featured prominently, but normally in that world, you wouldn't expect black people to exist. I mean, that was never the case. So isn't it like sort of going over the board? I mean, the same thing applies to LGBT people, and I mean, certain things are way too accentuated. Isn't that off-putting? Isn't that a bit misleading? That's one thing that I think to myself. Okay, let's turn to our guests, our panelists, and see what they have to say. Now, about I'm not an expert on Lord of the Rings. I'm Team Harry Potter. But let me say this. I mean, let's say there's a young person reading this book, and if you're a member of that disadvantaged group, then I mean, you identify with a couple of characters, and the skin color of the character in the book doesn't mean much. I don't think. I mean, how can you preclude someone from imagining a character? I mean, why can't we have a black Harry Potter? I think that's fine. I mean, I think we all need to get used to that. That's my personal point of view, and I love, like I said, Harry Potter, for instance. Yes. And the reason why we have this question is because historically certain people have been privileged. Why don't we have more women artists, like great women artists? I mean, that's the eternal question, right? How come LGBT people in the 21st century emerged all of a sudden for the first time? Or why our heroes or these characters in these TV series and novels are coming from minority backgrounds? Actually, this is challenging the status quo, challenging the privileged people. I mean, the status quo was created by those who were privileged. And let me say this, and let me give you an example. The Spider-Man, for instance. Spider-Man, the reason why he wears the mask is because everyone can identify with Spider-Man, right? I mean, that was the reason why the Spider-Man wears a mask, apparently. Whether or not it includes women, I don't know. Again, it's a male character, but nevertheless, I mean, this is something that we need to face up to. We're different, we're diverse, but we're together all across history. Power equilibrium changes, but we need to be ready to challenge our perceptions and misconceptions. Yes, I'd like to talk about an example. I'm going to try and speak in Turkish this time. Now, especially for disabled or disadvantaged groups, again, an example from Germany. There are so many projects, especially in the last couple of years, especially in the area of dance and circus arts, like imitation, like someone on a wheelchair can juggle things, for instance. I mean, this and that. And in the last couple of years, a new movement has been emerging, and that is, it's as follows. Disadvantaged people, rather than them trying to integrate into the mainstream, people are trying to find new ways, new realms for artistic expression, to create new artistic expression milieus. Like, why should a disabled person try and dance like a person with no disabilities, rather than a normative body? Perhaps a disabled body can also, perform a dance routine in a really astonishing way. So perhaps, there are things we can learn from these disadvantaged people. Hopefully, I have been able to express myself. No, you were brilliant. Yes, it's all about hearing these stories. Storytellers are changing because, these people exist as well. And, many of our misconceptions are being demolished. And why shouldn't stories change? Any other questions? This was a great question. Thank you for sharing this question with us. Last 10 minutes. Any questions, please? If not, I will continue. Or we can go to the next room and dance a little. Please. Microphone, please, and also please introduce yourself. Again, I don't know who this question is directed to. I'd love to hear from all of you. Meltem is my name. STGM is the name of my organization. Here's my question. We talked about coexistence and using culture and arts as a means, and this togetherness also embodies creation of new cultures, right? Generation of new cultures. And here's my question. Civil society organizations in the advocacy area, when it comes to coexistence and living with different cultures, what sort of an advocacy work should be carried out, and how will arts and culture contribute to this? Could you please fill us in on that? Yes, again, this is a great question. Going back to years ago, I mean, in the area of culture and arts, whatever happens was always part of the civil society, but people didn't really realize that at the beginning of the noughties, for instance. People thought that culture and arts was an isolated area, and maybe because culture and arts institutions didn't have a legal status and so on and so forth. But now, I think that during the 2013 Gezi protests in Istanbul, we all realized that we all have an important role to play, and that it is incumbent on all of us to assume responsibility. In the opening panel, someone said that civil society organizations should be supra-political, shouldn't be involved in politics, someone said. And it ticked me off a little, and the reason why is this exactly. I mean, we're the policymakers, we should be having a say in politics, and it doesn't matter how we do it. There are certain values that we need to preserve, certain values that we need to uphold, and for that to happen, I think we all have an important role to play, and culture and arts have a tremendous job in all of this. And it's all about empathizing with others, creating an utopia, and obviously this is not so easy, easier said than done. And in the face of advocacy, there's a price that certain people pay, and that needs a bit of a reckoning as well. And these are hefty prices. Our colleagues, our friends have paid this price. People have been incarcerated on bogus charges, and uttering these sentences is important. But obviously it's all about standing your ground as well, and maybe we need to move on to different defense strategies. Perhaps this is what we need to contemplate. Activism, yes, we have a lot to learn from one another. LGBT people have been doing this for years, and they have been devising a new way of activism. Feminist, Muslim women, they are under attack, not just from secular quarters, but from pious quarters as well. So all of these are, boxes that we need to get out, and we need activism for that. We need to exist at the same time, and this is something that we can only do together. Excellent. Anything you'd like to add? Yes, I agree with Esra. Last 5 minutes. Yes, this was a great question as well, and I think at the heart of the question is arts for people, or for arts. We have this very same notion, whether a cultural output, artistic output is political, social, and obviously yes. I mean, we're all part of a culture, we're all part of a society, and during the Gezi protests, like you said, I have realized the importance of this collective encounter. We should be a party, we can be a party, and we can do this through culture and arts. And yes, we need to find new methods, and we need to do this in an intelligent way. And that's why this is so important. But obviously, it's not so easy. Yes, when it comes to learning from one another, now I always learn a lot from you, especially when it comes to rights-based areas. I mean, people working in rights-based organizations, we should always cooperate with people working in arts and culture. Only then can we create this ecosystem, I think. I mean, in all our reports, we have this. We always try to make sure that we get together with people working in these areas. That's really important, I think. In the preparation of the report that I mentioned, we were in Gaziantep, for instance, and a cultural center, and it was really amazing. I mean, because Gaziantep receives a lot of immigrants from Syria, and people are trying to find ways to coexist, and they were doing this through a community center, and that was great, and this gave us the opportunity to transform ourselves as well. As İKSV, Istanbul Culture and Arts Foundation, we go back 50 years, but still we have a lot to learn from civil society organizations, and as such we can transform our existence, and we can take a look in the mirror, take a long, hard look in the mirror, and be critical of ourselves if needs be. So working together is key, and we need to do this even more. That's what we need. So I think we have come to the end of our time. Last 2 minutes, if you have a burning question, please do so. If not, we're going to adjourn the session. But before that, I'd like to thank our panelists very much. Thank you so much. And this was great. Thank you.